On today's episode of Behind the Wire, we are going to be talking about some very inappropriate book that is going to be taught in one of our schools in Washington State, and we're also going to be talking about one of Washington State's social programs that is facing financial insolvency and what they intend to do about it. As usual, I am your host and the president of Washington 3%, Robert Burwell, and let's go ahead and get into this. Our first story, we're talking about what a book that is being assigned to ninth graders in the Highland, Washington School District. And it is a fictional novel that talks about a lot of sexually explicit things, including one passage about ICE sexually assaulting migrants anally. Now, this is listed in the 2025 to 2026 ninth grade syllabus for Evergreen High School in the Highland School District as Unit 2. So it's one of the units that got a whole unit on this book. And the name of the novel is The Book of Unknown Americans. Now, this isn't just, a sexually suggestive book. This is a sexually graphic book. This is a porn novel. And just to give you some idea of what's in this book, I'm going to read a couple of excerpts out of it. I'm not going to go into all the ones that have been published because it's too hard to try to say this on YouTube without getting canceled. So I'm going to have to change some words in here, but you're going to get the gist of these two quotes, which, like I said, I'm only doing two just because it's just so disgusting, really. The first excerpt is, and I don't know, haven't read the whole thing, so I don't know who's talking, and who's replying and all that. So I'm just going to say that the first person says, "I've been thinking about all of the things I would do to her. Tell her to take her clothes off." And then somebody else says, "Stop." And then it says, "Have her suck my," starts with a D and it's pretty icky. Okay. So have her suck my that, right? Okay. That is in this book that's being assigned to ninth graders. The other passage I'm going to read is even more disgusting to be having young kids read, let alone young girls read. It says, "He rubbed himself dry, the hair matted on his barrel chest. His limp," starts with a P and ends in Enos, "hanging between his stocky legs." So it's talking about masturbation and describing how this thing's hanging there. So that's, that's straight up a pornographic novel. Why are we assigning this to ninth grade students? Something this dirty and disgusting, which, you have to be 18 years old to purchase porn. And yet we're going to assign this obviously graphic porn novel to students in the ninth grade to read and do, lessons on and reports or whatever on whatever they're going to do with it. They're going to study this sexually graphic pornographic novel. And, and I just don't understand that. What in the hell is wrong with, number one, the teacher that's assigning this garbage to ninth grade students. And what is wrong with the school district approving this filth in the public schools? Now, if you want to raise your kids around this stuff at an inappropriate age, that's your business. But it's not the school's business to teach this to everybody's kids. Okay, this kind of stuff is for adults, not for school children. And I just, it makes you wonder, what's the agenda here behind teaching this to our kids? I mean, just you want to turn them all into, perverts. You want to make them all sexually active, so they can go out and vote to keep abortions and stuff. I don't know. What's the point of teaching this filth to kids? I mean, I'm sorry. It's inappropriate. The vast majority of parents, except for the lunatic liberal left, who to say this is art. This is not art. It's pornography. Okay. There's a difference. And, the majority of parents in this state, if they knew about this, they'd be losing their mind over it. I mean, if I had a child in that school, I would pull them out of that school so fast it'd make their heads spin. Of course, I wouldn't have kids in school today anyway, so I'd be homeschooling them because our education system in Washington State is not only broken because the kids aren't learning anything, but it's also, too much of this kind of crap going on. Too much pushing sexually explicit stuff on kids, pushing the teacher's personal politics, pushing social issues. That's not their job. Their job is to teach them how to read and write and do math, learn some science, some history, learn how to evaluate things and become a productive adult, not teach this crap or their own personal opinions about the world. So anybody who has students in that school district or knows someone who does, make them aware of this garbage, because this is, to me, it's totally unacceptable. And it just shows the social decay in our state when you have this kind of stuff being presented to school kids. It's disgusting. I don't know what else to say. It's just, it's disturbing. I mean, this is what kind of a pervert is the teacher that wanted to push this book on kids, or whoever suggested pushing, using this book as a teaching tool in ninth grade. What kind of a sick, twisted, perverted individual thought this was a good idea? I don't know. But this is just another, just another reason to seriously consider homeschooling in Washington State until they fix things. Our second story is we are talking about this social program that is in trouble in Washington State. So the social program I'm talking about is, let's see, the Washington paid leave program is heading toward a fiscal cliff. Okay, so you remember in 2020 they passed this paid leave program so that people, they could take time off from work for medical issues or to take care of family members who were dealing with medical issues or whatever. And that the state will pay them for their time they have to take off from work. Okay. Now, according to the article on this, that we are facing a more than $350 million deficit in 2029 without changes to either raise more tax revenue or lower costs. Okay, so we're already, by 2029, we're going to be $350 million underwater in this program. Shocking. Now, how they pay for this is that they tax employers and employees a tax rate of, let's see, what is it currently? It's currently a tax rate of 0.92% on every dollar that they make to fund this program for the Paid Leave Act. And next year, they're projecting they're going to up that to 1.13%. So 1.13% of every dollar you make It's $1.13 out of every 100 you make is going to go to pay for this paid leave act. That's what they're projecting. But the problem is the law caps the rate at 1.2%, which we will reach by 2027. So in order to stay solvent, they're going to have to keep raising it every year. And they have it capped at 1.2%, which will hit that cap in 2 years. So one of the biggest problem with this program is, shockingly, they underestimated how popular it would be for people to take advantage of free money from the state so they could sit at home and take care of family and themselves, which, that in itself is legitimate, but I know it gets abused. People abuse this kind of stuff all the time. I mean, we had the company I worked at, the company offered paid leave for family emergencies and stuff like that. And we were constantly busting people for taking advantage of the system, going on vacation and other things, and claiming, they had a sick child or whatever. So, we fired a lot of people over that, abusing the program. And I'm sure, that the state is getting taken to the cleaners on this thing by a lot of people. Because you know how well the state monitors their programs, right? How diligent they are in following up and making sure that people aren't taking advantage of the system. Yeah, this is getting abused. It is, and that's why it's becoming insolvent. But anyways, it has become more popular than they predicted. And it was first enacted in 2020. The program has paid out since that time. They've paid out $2 billion to 240,000 individuals. That's how much they've paid out. Now, in 2023, lawmakers had to infuse $200 million into the program from the general fund to keep the program solvent. So it already went underwater. We had to throw another $200 million out of the general fund, which is where they pay for pretty much everything, including schools and roads and all those kind of things. It comes out of the fund. But we had to take $200 million away from that stuff to pay for this paid leave act to keep it from going under. But according to the article, this will likely not happen again due to the financial crisis the state is in. We're facing this massive budget deficit, and we just don't have the money to keep throwing extra money at this program. So that leaves them in a pickle. They have the option. The only options they have for fixing this is to raise taxes or cut the benefits in this program. Now, which one do you think they're going to choose? I know it's a real tough question, but which thing you think they're going to choose? You think they're going to cut the benefits so that we can afford it, or do you think they're going to raise taxes? Well, if you said raise taxes, you're at least paying attention to what's going on in the state, because that's what they're proposing. They want to raise the taxes on it. Now, so far they haven't, but this year there was a bill in the Senate that was SB 5292, and this passed the Senate almost unanimously. Now, the reason that it passed the Senate almost unanimously is because the bill would change the approach to calculating the further needs of the program. Okay, so instead of just guessing and saying, we think it's going to cost us about this much a year, so that's what we're going to try to fund it at, and, calculate the benefits and all that stuff based on, we just think, we're going to cost this much every year, so we're just going to throw X amount of dollars at it. Well, they want to change that process to a, they call it an actuarial process, actuarial approach, which is a systematic method for assessing risk and financial uncertainty using statistical analysis of large data sets to make predictions. So the Senate passed a bill this year where they said, gee, instead of just making a guess and ended up underwater, we're going to actually analyze it, do a little math, and figure out, how much it's going to cost, how many people we could accurately predict are going to take advantage of this based on past things. They're actually going to try to actually do some math and figure out how much this is really going to cost before they try to figure out how much they're going to raise the taxes. They wanted to do that, right? To say, hey, let's actually look at this and see what the actual costs and the actual incoming, outgoing, all that kind of stuff is, actually be responsible and figure the program out instead of just, making a wild guess and then saying, oh, gee, we underestimated and throw money at it, right? They're actually going to try to do some calculations and figure out how much this is going to cost and then try to figure out a way to fund it. So that passed the Senate almost unanimously. Then it got to the House, the Washington State House, which is just full of liberal stupidity. They got a hold of the bill, and they didn't just want to change the process for analyzing it. They wanted to raise the tax cap from, what was it? What was the tax cap on this? Let me go back here. Tax cap is 1.2. No, yeah, 1.2% is the tax cap. They wanted to raise the tax cap to 2%, right? Instead of just voting on, hey, actually, let's figure this crap out and do some math and, some statistical, look at some statistical information and look at trends and things like that and try to figure out what the need is, how much it's going to cost us, and then make a decision on taxes off of that. No, instead of doing that, the House just wanted to raise the tax cap to 2%, which is, almost a full percent higher than what the cap is. Rather than go through a process to try to have some real numbers and make some real calculations on what this is going to cost us. They just wanted to we'll just make a guess and raise the taxes, right? And because they added that to the bill, which would have changed the process to one that makes at least a little bit of sense, financial sense, to try to, calculate what this is going to cost us, they threw this tax in there too, and the bill stalled because of that. So thankfully, there were enough people in the House that said, hey, let's not just blindly, raise taxes and throw money at it like we do everything else. Let's actually take a step back and figure this out responsibly and kind of try to come up with a responsible way to fund it. No, they just wanted to throw in a tax in there. And so luckily it did not get through the House this year. It stalled out. But as things go in Washington, anything that doesn't pass this year is still alive and well for next year. So you can bet your bottom dollar you're going to see this again next year. And things tend to do better the second year. And things that fail one year tend to pass the next year in our one-party rule state. So you can probably expect they're going to add that 2% tax cap in there and then immediately raise it to that to fund this program. And, so that's just another tax that they want to impose on us. They want to raise another tax because of their incompetence and their lack of analysis of what stuff is actually going to cost us. And it's just another burden on working people in Washington State and on employers in Washington State. Again, they're already running employers out of the state with all their head taxes and all these other things they got going on. And now they want to raise yet another tax on employers to pay for this Paid Leave Act. Now, as far as the Paid Leave Act is concerned, I agree with the Paid Leave Act because, sometimes things happen and they can be financially devastating to you. And a lot of employers don't offer, enough time off or anything to take care of real emergencies that happen. The problem with this, these type of programs, especially at a government level, is the lack of oversight. And you all know that Washington has zero oversight of any program that they put out there. They have no oversight. So they're going to be taken to the cleaners. It's going to end up costing us a lot more than it should. And I'm sure it already has cost us a lot more than it should. And that's why we have to raise the cap and all this other stuff. But rather than being financially responsible and taking a step back and analyzing what this will really cost us, and also increasing the oversight of it to make sure there's no fraud and no abuse of this bill this law for the paid time off. Instead of being responsible like they're supposed to be in government, they just want to throw money at it. And I'm pretty sure that's probably what's going to happen next year. They're just going to throw more money at it, run more business out of Washington State by increasing their taxes and put a bigger tax burden on the working people of Washington State, all the while increasing our budget deficit, because by just arbitrarily throwing a number out there, even if it fixes it for a year or two, it's not gonna take care of the problem. And in a few years, it'll be broke again, because lack of doing a proper analysis and proper oversight will always cause programs like this in Washington State to go over budget. So once again, these are your elected government officials and their total incompetence, in Washington State, and their complete lack of caring how much they spend and how much of our money they waste. Again, if they really cared about the people of Washington State and they really wanted to protect the taxpayers, they would do the calculations properly, so they can budget accordingly, and also do their best to to have oversight on it, so to ensure that our tax dollars are not being wasted. But again, this is not their money. They don't care how much is wasted. They just can, take more from us and throw more money at it. That's the Washington way. So that's what we have to look forward to next year on this. But something will have to be done, because it's going to go insolvent if they don't. And good and well, here in Washington, the solution to everything is raise your taxes, throw money at it. That's it. We can't be bothered to be responsible and do proper analysis and set taxes accordingly. Nope. Just going to throw more money at it. That's the answer. That's always the answer in Washington State. So with that, I'm going to end this episode, and we will be back with another episode in a few days. And as usual, if you're curious about who we are, what we do, if you want to learn some things, learn about prepping, survival, whatever, come check us out at wa3percent.org. That's wa the number 3%.org. And also on our website, you can find a link for our charity for veterans and communities in Washington State that is called Boots on the Home Ground. We are 501c4, registered with Washington State, and every penny that is donated goes directly to those in need. No one in our organization who has anything to do with this program, anybody who runs it, does any of the work or anything like that, is paid a dime out of that money. Every penny that we get goes directly to help those in need. It's all volunteer organization, and nobody collects a paycheck from it. So if you can help, that's great. Like I said, we've helped a lot of people. We'd like to help a lot more. You have the option to donate a small amount monthly, or you can do a one-time donation. And with that, that's all I got for today. And we'll see you next time on Behind the Wire here on Rebel Radio. Good night.